Percolate on a particular mix of odd and inspiring news headlines in Wendy's Coffee House. Newsmakers with a penchant for the unknown, unexplained, and unusual share their experiences with UFOs, ghost encounters, near-death experiences, and more for your own unique blend of Wendy's Coffee House Curious. And now, here's Wendy.
The dulcet tones of Mark. Doing the intro there. Thank you, Mark. He's also producing the show today. Pinch hitting. Hi there. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you tuning in. I've been excited about this show, so I actually did some pre-show stuff just because this is one of the areas I find fascinating. It also has to do with consciousness. And so I wanted to give you plenty of stuff to go check out after you heard the show. My guest coming up in just a moment or two, Robert Peterson, the book Out-of-Body Experiences, How to Have Them, and What to Expect. Okay, so we're going to get into that. But getting into this, too, there's so much going on right now just in terms of consciousness. The show that we just did with the folks from Converse, iDetect, where they can detect lies by looking at your eyes, this phenomenal program that probably will be in place of the lie detector test, the polygraph test in the very near future. Anyway, so stuff like that. And then in the meantime, things that we really don't have any explanation for that are forcing us to rethink maybe who we are, what we are, and how things work. One of them right now with the advance of artificial intelligence, and it's incredibly fast-paced right now. Things are mind-bogglingly fast, which is, I think, what Elon Musk was saying, was we really need to get ahead of this thing because once it's out of the chute, we really don't have a chance to go back and fix any problems that we're not able to foresee right now. Well, the other thing is whether consciousness will be part of this artificial intelligence, whether anything that we create will eventually have the capacity to have some form of consciousness. I think so. But, that's my thing. I've seen too many things that suggest that consciousness isn't stuck to a body, and it isn't stuck to a specific, as in human body. So stuff like that. That's why I wanted to get into the out-of-body experiences. And I've read Robert Monroe's stuff. I've had my own experiences, interviewed other people about this. But what I like about Bob's stuff is that he also has a blog. You can check it out. He has the book. And it's a way of connecting with somebody who's in real time, approachable. And if you have questions, you can connect with him too. So I was going to do some more stuff on this, just some headlines. So I'm going to throw that in real quick before I put Bob on the spot. But there are some fun things happening right now in terms of the kinds of advances we're seeing in the science department so fast that they're thinking we might be able to, now that we found a galaxy not so far away, only 4 light years. Yeah, right. Anyway, how quickly are we really going to be moving to somewhere else? And even though Stephen Hawking has said he'll pay for anybody who's a climate denier to go, I think he was thinking Venus, a little closer. Scott Kelly, who has actually lived off planet, 520 days in space. How long did he think it would be before we would, move on to a galaxy, maybe not so far away? He was kind of ballparking it. And he put it this way. He said there's a great line that talks about how it took 100 million years for aquatic animals to transition to land and only 1 million for a man to make it to space. He's saying, well, to live off of Earth, out of our solar system permanently, about 100 million years. There you go. Which makes out-of-body travel so much more fascinating and actually doable. So we'll find out how far Bob has traveled. Bob, thank you for your patience. I appreciate you doing the talk today. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Yep, thanks, Wendy. It's nice to be on your show.
Now, I'm just going to wing some of this stuff just because I feel like I know you, having read your book and your blog and some of the other notes you've been taking. This is, I think, really incredible that people are beginning to open up about their experiences. And you've been, 40 years or 50 years experiencing some of these kinds of things?
No, just since 1979, so, 30 years or something. I guess 40.
More than a decade.
Yeah, 1979, it's been a while. I was thinking it's already 2018, so that marker, decade mark, is another decade mark is coming soon.
Yes, well, And will you talk about that? When you were a kid, the first experiences that you had gave you a better, I think, appreciation for the fact that you weren't stuck in the body.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a couple of childhood experiences, and I really didn't have the maturity to grasp what was happening at the time. And I guess the point I was trying to make in the first chapters of my book is that, they really didn't. I don't think I had really any propensity for out-of-body experiences. I think that it's never come easy to me. It's something I've always had to work hard at. And so, I mean, a couple of freak experiences, it's actually quite common. It's estimated that about 20% of all people have had one out-of-body experience in their life, and a lot of times it's only one. And most times they just kind of brush it off as, well, they don't understand it. They can't really fit it in their worldview, so they kind of, brush it under the rug and forget about it.
Well, and then there are other people who, once they have had a taste of that, are so inquisitive that they want to keep repeating and continue to practice and then become really adept at being able to do this. And I think as you begin to experiment more, what you realized in reading the material is that there were some questions that needed to be asked that nobody was addressing.
Well, yeah, I mean, what happened to me is that I got, I read Robert Monroe's first book back in 1979 in September, and, I didn't really take the guy seriously. I thought he was probably, dreaming or having some kind of weird thing happen to him or whatever. But he doesn't say in his books to take his word on it. He suggests some exercises that you can try to try to induce the experience for yourself. And so what I did is, I was a very curious, as you say, and scientific and skeptical person at the time. I still am to a large degree. So I decided to take Monroe's word at it and try his techniques. And much to my surprise, I got immediate results. And they were very frightening. I couldn't relate them to my scientific understanding of the world, nor could I relate them to I was raised as a Catholic, as my religion, and I couldn't relate to them to Catholicism either. And so it kind of set me on this course of needing to find out more just for my own, sanity, for my own peace of mind. It's like I had stumbled on what I felt was a new world, and nobody was talking about it, or very few people were talking about it. At the time, there were only, half a dozen or so books written on the subject, and so I kind of made it my personal mission to find out more and study it from a scientific point of view. And the only way that I could think of to do that is to learn to induce the experience myself, and which I did. And what I found is that I experienced a whole bunch of things that weren't in any of the books, and some very strange things, and some more solid techniques that worked better for me than anything I had read. And so eventually I decided I needed to write this all down. And so I wrote my first book, and I basically, before it was even published on paper, I put it on my website, and it's available on my website for free. So anyone who wants to read it, and that's to prove that I'm not in it for the money. I'm genuinely interested in this stuff and expanding our consciousness and our understanding of consciousness and, where it can take us.
Okay, and we're going to get into that. I got to take a little break here first, but I actually found the book, and I was thrilled because I found the blog, and then all of a sudden I found the book at the half-price store, the out-of-body experiences, and I was like, whoa, hey, this is great. Because it just gave me a little bit more. I like to have the actual, physical book in my hand. But it was one of those things where when I found both of those things, they work really well together. And so we're going to put you on hold for just a little bit if you're listening, because I have to take a break here for some commercials. In the meantime, though, the book is called, if you want to follow along, Out-of-Body Experiences and How to Have Them, What to Expect, Robert Peterson. It's my guest. We're going to be coming back in a few minutes here. Again, this is what's happening right now with consciousness. It gives you a way to expand your horizons without ever leaving the house. I like that. Grabbing some more coffee. We'll be back in a minute. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. My guest, has been practicing a lot. Out-of-body experiences. The book, How to Have Them and What to Expect, Robert Peterson. Bob Peterson, my guest here on Wendy's Coffee House. And this is something that my first experience that I remember as a kid, I also discounted. And it was flying over the school, just outside at night. And I thought, well, that is really cool. Everything looked the same as it would during the day, night. And I realized I had to have been out of my body. The one that stuck with me, though, because I took that for granted and didn't realize I could actually, in some way, shape, or form, induce it, the one that I remembered extremely well, because that was when I figured out it shouldn't be happening. I was at the dentist's office having my wisdom teeth removed and realized as I'm telling my mom afterward that I had seen him I was over his shoulder looking into my mouth as he was taking out the teeth and cutting them. And I was looking, I'm like, whoa. And as I'm telling her, that's when I realized that I had a different perspective than I should have had. And I was curious from then on. Okay, the over the school thing was like, oh, that's cool, nifty, keen. But then the other one, this can happen more than once. So with your experiences as a kid, I think that at least you knew that there was a real, especially the one where you had this encounter with a bigger being, a larger being, a greater being. There aren't any perfect words for that. But if you could bring that back in for just a moment and explain, because I think that helps a lot. It gives you more comfort, I think.
Just the understanding. I guess I'm not following where you're going with this.
Well, the very beginning of the book, when you talk about the when you were a kid, the experience you had where you had that love, that feeling of the big hug, and being on another Earth.
Yeah, I did have a childhood experience, and like I said, it seemed very otherworldly at the time. It didn't really feel the same as my normal out-of-body experiences, if you can call them normal. But what happened there is that I was playing around I was a teenager, and I was playing around with a friend of mine named Frank, and we got to talking, and we basically were saying, well, what would happen, if I knocked you out, or if what would we experience if we got knocked out? And so I volunteered for the experiment, and I had him give me a bear hug. And basically, I couldn't breathe, so he basically, suffocated me until I collapsed. And of course, then my body went unconscious, and I was able to breathe normally. The body was anyway. But what I experienced at that time was, it seemed to me that I was completely transformed. It was like I had woken up, like this earthly existence was completely a dream, a fabrication. And I thought, oh, how silly of me, and, I must have fallen asleep, and I went about my business. And it seemed like I was over in this other physical world for over 100 years. I mean, it just seemed like forever. And it was so long that I had completely forgotten about all of the experience I had up to that point. I forgot about Frank and the bear hug, and I forgot about my mom and dad and everything, and I was going about a normal life somewhere else. And then one day it seemed like I was walking somewhere, and I got dizzy and fell down and opened my eyes, and there was Frank's face staring down at me, and I was like, well, where the heck am I? And I had absolutely no clue. And then it kind of slowly dawned on me as, oh, yeah, I kind of vaguely remember this place. It was a long, long time ago, 100 years ago. And it was called Earth, and I kind of remember this. And I asked, when I kind of sat up and I was still in a daze, I asked Frank, how long was I out? And he said, oh, it was only, a couple minutes. And to me, it seemed like it was, a long, many, many years. So, yeah, and that kind of gave me a perspective on life. But still, it wasn't one of those things I was willing to repeat. And, thinking about it now, it's kind of the stupid things that kids do. When you're a teenager, you think you're invincible, and you try stupid things like that. And, I could have gotten seriously injured that way. But as it was, it all turned out okay.
Well, the reason I brought that back in is because it's a very unique experience. And it also brings to mind that timeless element that when you do get into some of these consciousness experiments and explorations, time is a completely different factor. And as you're traveling out of body, some of these experiences you see the world as it is, and others, everything's kind of warped. When you got into this and people started asking you questions, I like the fact that you brought up one of the first things was that poking. You feel like people are prodding and poking you as you're trying to get out of the body. Very few people address that, or at least from the stuff I've read.
Yeah, I mean, what happened is I started, I used, as I said before, I used Robert Monroe's technique, and I got a very scary encounter with the vibrations, which is a pre-out-of-body state phenomenon. And it was very scary. It felt literally like I was being electrocuted. But it's not always scary that way. And as you go on, it smoothens out. So now I hardly even notice the vibrations. But anyway, the next time I tried Monroe's technique, it didn't work. I tried the same thing, and I could not get it to work. So I started investigating other techniques until I stumbled on, some things that worked for me. But yeah, what I found is in trying to induce these out-of-body experiences, I had to go into an altered state of consciousness and approach sleep without actually, going into the sleep state. So I had to remain conscious. I had to train myself to remain conscious as I'm entering the sleep state. And what I found is that, there was all kinds of scary what I call pokes and prods. And to me, it seemed like I would hear banging noises. And turns out that this is a very common thing, is people hear, sudden booming sounds or banging noises. It'll feel like you're being poked or whatever. And people are, it's easy to try and write it off as, some kind of hypnagogic hallucinations, and maybe that's what it is. But at the time, I felt like it was, some otherworldly presence that was in the bedroom trying to discourage me from inducing these out-of-body experiences. And now, many, many years later, what I've come to believe is that there's a psychological barrier. Your subconscious actually doesn't want you to go out of body until you're psychologically prepared for it, because not everybody is going to handle it well. And I think what it does is the subconscious throws these scary things occasionally at you, and some people call it the dweller on the threshold. And so basically, you can see strange, scary things, hallucinations and whatnot, and for the most part, they're not real. They can be disregarded. And if you get past that point where you face down these scary, things, sights and sounds and pokes and prods and all of that, and if you learn to not flinch and get upset and keep your mind, focused in one thing, and that's your out-of-body state, then you stop having that. It finally, throws in the towel, says, okay, uncle, you're ready. You can handle scary things now. You're good to go. And so then it becomes a whole lot less scary.
One of the things I wanted to get into, because as anyone explores consciousness and expands their awareness and has, whether it's a spontaneous or an actual intended experience, the psychic development, those abilities start to also open. And I wanted to ask you about your experience with your father, because you were getting some precognitive information in different ways, and then you connected with him after he died. So I wanted to ask about that as well. Again, my guest, Robert Peterson, out-of-body experiences, how to have them, and what to expect. And whether you've had anything like this, it does shift your perspective if you're able to induce it. But it's also one of those things that you don't have to. Sometimes it's just spontaneous. And meditation is another way of getting yourself into a state that you're a little more fearless and open to experiencing the unexplained. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Again, my guest. You can check out his blog site and follow along the OBE Outlook on Life. If you have questions, you can connect with him there as well. And also get the book online at his site, robertpeterson.org. Okay? And it's free. Or you can go to the half-price store and get one like I did. It's all relative and available. Back in a few. KCMO Talk Radio. Hi there, it's Wendy's Coffee House. I'm Wendy. Thank you for tuning in. My guest, Robert Peterson. Out-of-body experiences, how to have them and what to expect. And if you read Robert Monroe's work, if you read a lot of information out there on how to do the out-of-body thing, okay, intentionally. And some people get it right off the bat. I seem to mind spontaneous. So, however, when I have tried, the one thing that I was thrilled at seeing was the attention to the prodding, because I was meditating in a real nice, deep state, and all of a sudden I felt somebody touch my lip and went, eep, lost it. Like, okay, that's not going to work. So, but that's some of that stuff. I've also been in a tank, not a tank, but a float room, which is really relaxing, very peaceful. And I felt touching, my arm and felt the vibrations start. And I'm in the middle of, the tank experience or float experience. And I'm like, okay, there are other ways to have these experiences. And you get into several different demonstrations or practices that will help enhance or, prepare somebody to do that. I appreciate adding these other ways of, gleaned from years of doing your own work that help give people a clue that there are more ways to get yourself into this state. And if it doesn't work the first time, then don't give up.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things is, what works for one person doesn't work for another. And I get a lot of email from people saying, okay, I've, been trying to induce an out-of-body experience for 2 years, and it's just not happening, and what am I doing wrong? And I ask them, well, what methods have you tried? And they tell me they've tried the same thing over and over and over. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. If it's not working for you, you got to change it up. You got to try a different method, because everybody has a different, brain and different consciousness, and it takes a different, slightly different thing to trick your mind into going into that state. Really what it is, I'm not saying that the out-of-body experience is a brain phenomenon, but basically your brain has, the recent scientific research indicates that your brain has an area called the right temporoparietal junction that keeps track of your spatial location. And it gets its information, basically it compiles the information from your three senses of sight, sound, and hearing. And so basically you have to first, before you can induce an out-of-body state, you have to trick your brain and trick the TPJ into letting go of the physical framework in order to get that other framework. And so definitely when I was saying earlier that, when I started doing this, there was a dozen or so books on out-of-body experience. Now I've got a collection of more than 200, and every year there are several more being written. And all of them have a slightly different take, a slightly different perspective. And so what I've been doing is going through in my blog and reviewing, doing book reviews and telling, the people who are interested, what methods does this book give and what does it bring to the table. And I'm finding some very fascinating research out there. And, a lot of information and changing it up is important.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to prepare people for is that when you start doing these kinds of experiences, other things come into play, and you found that out, that you became more psychic. You were having more instances where you didn't call yourself a psychic, but you were getting some real good information, especially when it came to dealing with your father.
Yeah, and that's something that none of the books really prepared me for at the time, and that's why I felt that I had to write my own book, is, when I started inducing these out-of-body experiences, I was basically dabbling with altered states of consciousness. And when I did that, it's like it kind of unlocked some kind of psychic tuning or whatever. And I don't know exactly how to explain it. But what happened is, I found more and more as time went on that I was, I'd find myself taking the words out of people's mouths. And, so I would basically know what they were going to say before they said it. I would, kind of know what was going to be playing on the radio before I turned it on. I was having a sense of deja vu where it seemed like I was experiencing the same thing like I had experienced before. And all these strange things just started happening to me, and none of the books really talked about that. So I wanted to bring that out in my book. And I do think that people should be prepared that, if they start dabbling with these altered states, that this can be a result, that you can start to have psychic experiences. And if you're after psychic experiences, this may be a good way to kickstart them, if you will. But yeah, as far as my father is concerned, one of the things that, there were some signs of his physical. He started having health problems when he got into his late 50s, which is kind of scary, close to where I'm at right now. But I started getting a sense that he wouldn't be around a lot longer, and maybe that was just my own paranoia or whatever. But I kind of got the feeling that this was going to happen, and it did. My father did pass away not long after that. Those feelings started. And then there were some strange things that happened, and as you said, I had an out-of-body experience in which my father came to me, and we had a very short conversation, which is in the first book, and it's on the website. And basically, he told me that we were taking his death a little too hard and things like that. But it was a very touching affirmation to me that we do survive physical death.
Well, and you tried to get some more information out of him, and he said everything's going to be okay. That's not fair.
It seems like that's what they always say.
Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's relative. It's okay. Like, okay, Dad, could you been a little bit more forthcoming? And yeah. So have you had any contact with him since then?
No, not really.
Okay. Not really.
Not that I can recall offhand.
Okay. Well, if it's not really, kind of leaves it open. The other thing about this is that when you get into the precognition and those kinds of things, you were asking, I guess you were, tired of the foggy, fuzzy thing, and you wanted a real something tangible, and you got it. Remember the hand?
I guess I don't know which thing you're referencing offhand. I know I can tell you this much though. I've always, like I said, been very skeptical and scientific, and so in the first book, I really wanted to approach it as, this is what I experienced, this is what I found firsthand. And I didn't want to devolve into in speculation and this and that. I wanted to basically be concrete about it and what I experienced. And to me, out-of-body experience is a very concrete thing. It's a slap in your face real. You can't deny that it happened, and it's, you're fully conscious, you're aware, you're out there. And it's not, things like deja vu or, taking the words out of people's mouths, that kind of thing, or precognition. Those are kind of, they're really, they can be in your face, and after a while, after the coincidences start piling up to the point of absurdity, then you have to admit, okay, something is going on here. I describe a day in my first book where, I started having all kinds of weird experiences, and they were piling up so fast that I couldn't deny it anymore. But still, those things are all, somebody who was really skeptical, some kind of a James Randi or something could say, it was just coincidence or whatever. But out-of-body experience is basically a first-hand thing. It doesn't get any more in your face than that, and that's what I like about it.
Okay, I'm going to bring that back up. I can't find the page just yet, but I'm going to bring that after the break here on the hand, because I thought that was a unique aspect. Anyway, we're talking out-of-body experiences, and the book is available. You can pick it up online, or you can read it online with at the website that Rob has. It's robertpeterson.org. And more from Bob next on Wendy's Coffee House. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. If you miss anything, you can check out the blog. Wendy's Coffee House is on Blogspot. Put the links for the show and information. I already have some up there. Graham Nichols was one of the ones I've interviewed before, and his information is up there as well. There's so much to cover with this. It's consciousness, it's exploration. It gets into psychic information. It gets into basically expanded awareness. And you can do a lot of these things and get incredible results without really intending and just trusting that the outcome will give you what you need to know. But when I was reading the book, what I thought was fascinating, and the reason I wanted to go back to it, because it's unusual and it's considered physical mediumship, okay? It's basically making something appear. And what it was an incident you had when you had something appear above your head, and it was a hand, and then it went away. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I do remember that experience. Yeah, that was in the first book. Yeah, I mean, basically, I was just trying to achieve the out-of-body state, and you suddenly get this feeling that something's strange or whatever, and I opened my eyes and I saw a hand materialized above my head, and then it kind of disappeared, and it freaked me out, needless to say. But that's it's one of those weird things that happen. I mean, when you're dabbling with out-of-body experiences, you got to expect the weird and the abnormal.
Well, and that's why I wanted some of these things is if you can get back the fear factor and the all of a sudden getting basically caught off guard so that you lose your focus, then you can go forward into making the experience work for you on your terms. And there are some times in here you talk about all the different experiences where then you just you lose your focus and then go back into it and maybe pick up where you left off. Is there one time in here that maybe that stands out? Because you've got another book beyond this. So what else about these encounters could you say were extraordinary?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, there's a lot of strange things that happen on the border between waking and sleeping, and a lot of it is this guardian on the threshold I was talking about earlier, which is basically, I think, your subconscious just putting up roadblocks and strange things. It's very common. A lot of people describe the same kind of pre-out-of-body symptoms. Some of the things that sometimes happen to me is I'll be focusing my mind down into that perfect state where it's like very, very narrow and very focused, and yet this tiny thread of awareness. And all of a sudden I'll see a scary face appear, and it's like somebody, suddenly just tried to scare me. And I don't know if it was my subconscious, or if it was just a hypnagogic hallucination, or if it was actually some kind of astral entity out there that was trying to, just have a few laughs by scaring me. But anyway, focus is the main thing. You have to retain a certain amount of focus, and it has to be, you can't focus on the body at all. You have to turn your focus away from the senses, the physical senses, and narrow your mind down into a single thread of awareness. And if you lose that, in my second book, I talk about it being like walking a tightrope. It's a very thin line that you have to walk of consciousness, and you can fall off either direction if you lose your thread of awareness. If you could fall asleep by accident if you're not careful, or you can get yourself back to a more fully conscious state to a point where you're actually ruining your attempt. And so it's a very fine line that you have to walk, and yeah, occasionally weird things like that will happen and startle you out of it, and then it's like, crap, now I got to start over. But that's happened to me, I don't know how many thousands of times.
Okay, now you've had help. You said your wife has helped with the book. Has she had any out-of-body experiences as well?
She had one experience. We actually took William Buhlman's, I don't know if you've had him on the show, but we took his out-of-body intensive class at the Monroe Institute a couple years ago, and she actually had an experience where she rolled off the bed in her astral body, but she immediately came back to her senses, and, so it was one of those split-second things. She really is not focused on out-of-body things. I mean, what I find is that everybody's kind of got their own pet topic, and mine happens to be out of body, but she would rather, investigate, children's past lives and things like that. She's got this keen sense of history, and so she likes, more the past life regressions and things like that, and time travel and topics like that. So she doesn't tend to focus on out-of-body stuff like I do.
Well, the part of this, I think, just going into it online and seeing how you've laid out the chapters and stuff, it gives people a great place to start. And then when you're also reviewing the books on your blog, I like the one that you just reviewed recently, and it for me, this is one of those things. I started with meditation and things like that, and then my consciousness shift there. And so, and it was called a spiritually transformative event or experience. That was STE. And I'm like, okay, there's a name for it. How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain is the book that you were saying. Well, I don't know if I should cover this as out of body, but I think it's excellent. It plays right in because it gets that mind shift that gets you outside of the feeling that your body is the only thing that's real. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of book reviews on my blog. I've done, 87 or something different book reviews, and they all kind of have a slightly different take. They all bring something different to the table, but when it comes right down to it, a lot of them have very similar, they describe very similar things, and so it's very hard to find somebody who's actually thinking outside the box, and that's what I liked about this book, How Enlightenment Changes the Brain, is because it's basically written by two neuroscientists, and they basically studied a whole bunch of different types of altered states of consciousness, like speaking in tongues and Zen meditation and things like that. And they actually tried to figure out what happens to the brain. And what they found, and other people have reported this as well, scientists, is that it doesn't have so much to do with the electrical activity in any area of the brain, but it has to do with a drop in the activity from the prefrontal cortex. And so when you have, so what they're saying in their book, one of the things they do is they give several techniques to get your prefrontal cortex working, overdrive, and then, and definitely with things that are not related to out-of-body techniques, and then basically they give you techniques to drop that, level of activity in the prefrontal cortex down to where it needs to be to induce an altered state of consciousness. And they've had a fair amount of success with it, and I give a lot of that information in the blog, in the book review.
Well, that's excellent, too, because it's with this, there is so much to learn. And if you have time, there's a payoff because it gives you a greater appreciation for the ability to lose the stress, get beyond the little mundane, and say, wow, there's a cool world to explore out there. I appreciate your time. We're going to have to get out of here. But again, the second book, I haven't seen it. Is it also available at Amazon?
Yeah, I've actually got 4 books. The second book is called Lessons Out of the Body, and it takes a slightly different approach. The fourth book, the third book is a novel that I wrote because I had this idea stuck in my head. The fourth book is called Answers Within, and in the first book I mentioned that I started experiencing some of these psychic type things or whatever, a phenomenon that is known as my inner voice.
30 seconds.
And basically,
30 seconds.
I think that's something that channelers use, and it's the Answers Within is about that.
Okay, all right, and I understand that. I like that, Bob. We didn't get to talk about everything, but I think we at least got people interested, so hopefully they'll connect with you again. The book, Out of Body Experiences, it's a start. Robert Peterson, check it out. How to have them, what to expect, and then check out the blog, too, the Out of Body Outlook on Life. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Bob, for talking with me.
Thanks, Wendy, for having me.
And if you're curious, there's so much to explore. Just get started. Whatever direction you go, we'll be rooting for you. Here's some more coffee. Wake up. It's time. Till next time, Wendy's Coffee House online.